A ceremonial staff flew through the air of the Vatican's most sacred halls, only to be caught mid-flight by the steady hand of a Swiss Guard officer. The Italian judge, who threw it in rage, found himself facing arrest moments later, his authority crumbling before a man he dismissed as mere decoration. Here's what happened when centuries of tradition met modern justice. Now, before we continue, tell us where you're watching from in the comments. And make sure to subscribe because tomorrow at this very same time, we're dropping another powerful Swiss Guard story that you won't want to miss. The afternoon sun glinted off the polished brass buttons of Lieutenant Matteo Benedetti's blue-yellow-red striped tunic as he took his position near the entrance to the Sala Regia. American tourists paused to stare at the unexpected sight of a Swiss Guard, the Pope's personal bodyguards, known for their Renaissance-style uniforms, inside the Vatican's most magnificent ceremonial hall. A small child tugged at his mother's sleeve and pointed, the excitement in his eyes capturing the enduring mystique that surrounded the historic regiment. Benedetti was accustomed to the attention. 8 years with the Swiss Guard had taught him to exist comfortably under the public gaze, to transform from man to living symbol with the wearing of the uniform. At 34, Benedetti cut an imposing figure even by Swiss Guard standards, 6 feet tall with shoulders squared by years of military discipline. His Morion helmet added another 6 inches to his already considerable height, making him impossible to miss among the Italian judges and Vatican officials in their formal attire. Benedetti had not planned to be on ceremonial duty during the judicial reception today. His assignment to palace security had been scheduled for next week, but an urgent request from the Vatican Secretariat had required his presence immediately. The gathering involved discussions of ecclesiastical law reform between Italian legal officials and Vatican canon law scholars, a delicate diplomatic matter requiring the highest levels of protocol. "Quite the impressive uniform you're wearing," remarked a Vatican aide as Benedetti checked his identification at the entrance. "We don't often see Swiss Guard in full ceremony for academic receptions." "Duty calls when His Holiness requests it," Benedetti replied with a slight smile that quickly returned to his practiced, neutral expression. Years of standing motionless before crowds of pilgrims had given him a mastery of his features that few civilian observers could comprehend. A young assistant carrying legal documents nearly collided with him as he entered the hall. She stopped short, eyes widening at the unexpected sight of his ceremonial uniform. "Scusi, Lieutenant," she stammered. "The reception is about to begin. His Holiness will be joining us shortly." "Grazie," Benedetti confirmed. He checked his watch, an understated timepiece that had been his grandfather's, a man who had served in the Alpine troops during World War II. He had 15 minutes to position himself properly. Plenty of time for a man who measured his life in precision. The Sala Regia boasted the austere grandeur of papal tradition. Vasari's frescoes absorbed the sound of hushed conversations, while portraits of previous pontiffs gazed down from gilded frames. As Lieutenant Benedetti took his position, conversations momentarily faltered, heads turning to assess the unexpected splash of ceremonial color among the somber academic attire. He positioned himself with military precision, back straight, feet at the proper angle, halberd held at regulation distance. Despite the scholarly setting, his bearing remained every inch that of a Vatican Swiss Guard. Several dignitaries nearby shifted slightly, unconsciously creating more space for him, as if his uniform demanded particular deference. Among the assembled Italian judges moved Carlo Ventresca with practiced authority. At 56, he carried himself with the confident stride of a man accustomed to commanding courtrooms. His reputation preceded him, brilliant but temperamental, with a particularly caustic attitude toward those he perceived as beneath his intellectual station. His thin lips rarely smiled, and his eyes, behind expensive wire-rimmed glasses, held the perpetual calculation of a man assessing weaknesses. The son of a factory worker who had fought his way through law school, Ventresca had developed a complex relationship with authority and hierarchy. His ascent to the Milan bench had been marked by both academic brilliance and a relentless ambition that occasionally manifested as cruelty toward those he deemed intellectually inferior. Colleagues tolerated his abrasive personality because of his undeniable legal mind. But few sought his company outside the courthouse, As Pope Francis entered the Sala Regia, accompanied by Monsignor Paolo Conti and Cardinal Camerlengo, the assembled guests rose respectfully. The pontiff moved with characteristic humility, greeting each delegation with genuine warmth, despite the formal nature of the gathering. His presence transformed the grand hall into something more intimate, putting even the most nervous academics at ease. Ventresca's gaze swept the room with practiced efficiency, cataloging the various attendees. His eyes paused when they reached Lieutenant Benedetti, a momentary calculation that suggested he found the ceremonial display somehow offensive. The reception proceeded with typical Vatican courtesy as His Holiness engaged each group with questions that demonstrated his remarkable grasp of legal complexities. Yet throughout the proceedings, Ventresca's attention repeatedly drifted toward the Swiss Guard position. Between examining documents and engaging in conversation, the judge's eyes returned to the colorfully uniformed figure with increasing frequency. Commander William Hastings, a retired Royal Navy officer attending as part of a British diplomatic observation team, noticed the judge's fixation. He leaned toward Colonel James Rutherford, formerly of the Royal Marines. That Italian judge seems rather preoccupied with the ceremonial guard. Rutherford nodded grimly. Ventresca is known for his contempt toward anyone he considers beneath his station. An elderly Italian veteran near the wall, former Carabinieri Commander Giuseppe Torretti, had also observed the brewing tension. His wife placed a concerned hand on his arm, recognizing the warning signs. Halfway through the discussion of Vatican-Italian legal cooperation, Judge Ventresca abruptly raised his hand, silencing a canon law professor mid-sentence. "Before we continue," he announced, his voice carrying the practiced projection of decades in courtrooms, "I feel compelled to address a matter that I find distracting." His gaze fixed directly on Lieutenant Benedetti. "You there in the costume, would you care to explain your presence in this scholarly gathering?" A stunned silence fell over the Sala Regia. Pope Francis himself paused in his conversation, his serene expression registering the unexpected breach of protocol. Monsignor Conti looked genuinely confused by this unprecedented interruption. Lieutenant Benedetti rose with military precision. "Lieutenant Matteo Benedetti, Your Honor, Pontifical Swiss Guard, 2nd Company. I am on ceremonial duty for His Holiness's reception." "I see," Ventresca replied, his tone dripping with disdain. "And you felt it appropriate to appear in full theatrical regalia rather than appropriate diplomatic attire? This is a serious academic discussion, Lieutenant, not a tourist attraction. With respect, Your Honor, regulations require ceremonial dress when serving in the presence of His Holiness during official Vatican functions. Are you suggesting that a discussion of ecclesiastical law constitutes a military matter requiring your colorful presence?" "No, Your Honor. However, protocol dictates full ceremonial uniform for palace security during papal receptions." Ventresca stood, his judicial bearing commanding attention. "I find this display distracting to serious legal scholarship. The ridiculous helmet, in particular, seems designed to draw attention rather than show respect. Your Honor, the Mauryan helmet is part of the ceremonial uniform established by papal decree in 1506. I would be out of regulation without it." "Ceremonial," Ventresca repeated with contempt, "an apt description for a role that exists primarily for pageantry rather than substance." Monsignor Conti stepped forward. "Your Honor, perhaps we might return to the jurisdictional matters." "In a moment, Monsignor," Ventresca cut him off sharply. "This theatrical interruption deserves addressing." He returned his attention to Benedetti. "Tell me, Lieutenant, does your training include anything beyond marching in formations and standing motionless, or is that the extent of your capabilities?" The insult hung in the air, shocking in its naked hostility. Commander Hastings and Colonel Rutherford exchanged glances of disgust. Giuseppe Torretti half rose from his chair before his wife prevented him from intervening. "My training includes tactical operations and legal protocols, sir," Benedetti responded calmly. Something in this precise response seemed to further aggravate Ventresca. "Very impressive. Perhaps you'd remove that ridiculous helmet while serious scholars are present. Ceremonial regulations require headgear during papal functions, sir." Judge Ventresca's jaw tightened visibly. I find your carnival costume disruptive and your responses insolent. Monsignor Conti stepped forward. Your Honor, Lieutenant Benedetti follows standard Vatican protocol. Are you instructing me, Monsignor? Ventresca snapped. Sit down. His expression hardened into open hostility. Tell me, Lieutenant, do you find it difficult to think independently after years of blindly following orders? A ripple of shocked whispers spread through the hall. Giuseppe Toretti's wife gripped his arm tighter. Commander Hastings exchanged disgusted glances with Colonel Rutherford. Swiss Guard selection requires both discipline and independent judgment, Your Honor, Benedetti replied steadily. Ventresca laughed harshly. How rehearsed. Did they provide that speech with the costume? He gestured contemptuously toward Benedetti's medal ribbons. And these decorations? Participation awards for standing still? The Distinguished Service Cross was awarded for actions during the protection of Christian refugees in Syria, Your Honor, Benedetti stated simply. The commendation beside it represents the Papal Medal of Honor for disarming an explosive device near Damascus. Though factual and without embellishment, his words carried the weight of unspoken experiences. Giuseppe Toretti nodded with grim recognition. Commander Hastings whispered something that made both British officers' expressions harden. Judge Ventresca's face flushed darker. Your war stories don't impress me, Lieutenant. Men who need to dress up in medieval costumes clearly missed something vital in their development. Article 12 of Vatican Criminal Code recognizes ceremonial duties as institutionally vital, Your Honor, Benedetti responded. The European Court has similarly acknowledged their cultural value. Ventresca pushed to his feet, abandoning judicial dignity. Are you lecturing me on law, Lieutenant? 23 years on the bench, and I'm getting lessons from a toy soldier. No, Your Honor. I'm responding to your questions. I find your presence, manner, and responses contemptuous of this gathering. Monsignor Conti stepped forward desperately. Your Honor, Lieutenant Benedetti has been entirely respectful. Sit down or you'll be removed, Ventresca threatened. I determine what constitutes disrespect. Benedetti remained at attention. Vatican Criminal Code Section 15 requires demonstrated willful disrespect or obstruction, Your Honor. There, Ventresca exploded. That's your contempt, questioning my authority. Pope Francis had moved closer, recognizing the diplomatic crisis. Perhaps Your Honor might consult the Vienna Convention regarding conduct in Vatican territory, Benedetti suggested calmly. Ventresca's knuckles whitened as he gripped the ceremonial table. How dare you cite international law to me? Commander Hastings positioned himself strategically. Colonel Rutherford's bearing shifted into combat readiness. The Vienna Convention upholds diplomatic conduct regardless of disagreements, Your Honor. Enough! Ventresca roared, his control snapping completely. In pure rage, he snatched the ornate ceremonial staff from the table beside him and hurled it directly at Lieutenant Benedetti. The heavy silver rod sailed across the space between them. With swift reflexes honed by tactical training, Benedetti's hand shot up and caught the projectile mid-flight. Complete silence fell over the Sala Regia. Benedetti stood perfectly still, the judge's weapon now held in his white-gloved hand. For a breathless moment, no one moved. Judge Ventresca appeared stunned by his own action, his expression shifting from shock to fear. That constitutes assault on a Vatican official under Article 85, Lieutenant Benedetti stated into the silence. A felony offense regardless of jurisdiction. He placed the staff on the table. Additionally, this breaches diplomatic protocol under the Lateran Treaty. Benedetti removed his Mauryan helmet, transforming from ceremonial figure to immediate authority. This situation requires formal intervention. Lieutenant Matteo Benedetti, Pontifical Swiss Guard. Before military service, I completed my law degree at the University of Geneva, specializing in international criminal law. A collective gasp rippled through the hall. Ventresca stumbled backward. I maintain legal credentials through continued education, which is why I immediately recognized multiple violations of Vatican criminal law and diplomatic protocols. He addressed the Gendarmeria officers. You witnessed unprovoked assault by a foreign judicial official against Vatican security personnel. This requires immediate intervention. This is preposterous, Ventresca sputtered. I am a senior Italian judge. Vatican Criminal Code states diplomatic immunity doesn't extend to violent crimes within Vatican territory, Benedetti replied. Precisely. Commander Hastings stepped forward. Commander Hastings, Royal Navy retired. I witnessed the entire assault. Colonel Rutherford joined him. Colonel Rutherford, Royal Marines. I can provide sworn testimony. Giuseppe Torretti rose slowly. General Torretti, former Carabinieri. This man disgraced the Italian legal system. Pope Francis moved closer, his quiet presence clearly supporting his Swiss Guard officer. A brief nod was all that passed between them. This is orchestrated embarrassment, Ventresca protested weakly. I will not be lectured by a man playing soldier. The senior Gendarmeria officer approached with professional calm. Your Honor, I must report this to the Vatican Secretary of State. Until resolved, you must accompany us. Cardinal Camerlengo entered, scarlet robes commanding immediate attention. What has occurred? Your Eminence, Judge Ventresca verbally abused Lieutenant Benedetti and physically assaulted him, Monsignor Conti reported. The Cardinal's expression hardened. Judge Ventresca, do you dispute this? Your Eminence, this has been exaggerated. Assaulting Vatican personnel in His Holiness's presence exceeds any diplomatic disagreement, the Cardinal stated firmly. As officers escorted Ventresca away, Pope Francis approached Lieutenant Benedetti with a gentle nod of gratitude. Lieutenant, Cardinal Camerlengo addressed him, your service deserves respect, not ridicule. Thank you, Your Eminence. Judge Ventresca's behavior doesn't represent Italian legal professionals. With order restored, Lieutenant Benedetti replaced his helmet and resumed ceremonial duties. The uniform that had made him a target now commanded respectful attention from every remaining guest. Throughout the remainder of the reception, officials approached with quiet words of support. The British officers shared brief military experiences with a fellow veteran who had proven himself under pressure. As afternoon sun slanted through palace windows, Lieutenant Benedetti maintained his post with the same disciplined attention. The ceremonial uniform remained unchanged, but everyone who witnessed the confrontation now understood what they were truly seeing. Not a costumed performer, but a warrior scholar, whose quiet strength embodied the best traditions of service and justice. Judge Ventresca's attempt to humiliate him had only revealed the difference between authority earned and respect demanded. News of the incident spread rapidly through Italian judicial circles. Within days, attorneys came forward with accounts of Ventresca's intimidating behavior. What began as one confrontation expanded into a misconduct pattern that would end his career. Swiss Guard headquarters received a full report. Rather than facing discipline, Lieutenant Benedetti found a commendation in his file. Maintained dignity of the Guard while upholding justice under extraordinary provocation. Pope Francis continued his regular schedule, but those close to him noted his particular warmth toward the Swiss Guard detail. The quiet respect he had shown Benedetti spoke volumes about values that matter in sacred responsibility. What would you do if faced with someone who abused their authority to belittle others? Lieutenant Benedetti's story reminds us that true strength lies not in shouting loudest or holding highest position, but in maintaining composure while standing firm for what's right. Behind the ceremonial uniform that Judge Ventresca mocked stood a man of exceptional intelligence, discipline, and moral courage, qualities that revealed the judge's own shortcomings. Sometimes those we're quickest to dismiss based on appearance are the ones with most to teach us about integrity and respect. If this story made you think about looking beyond appearances and standing up to power abuse, hit that like button and subscribe for more Swiss Guard stories. Press the bell icon to never miss uploads. Have you ever misjudged someone based on appearance only to discover hidden depths? Share your experiences in the comments. We read everyone and love hearing your thoughts. We'll see you tomorrow at the same time with another brand new video.